20 years ago, 15 years ago. We have to have the forward-looking answers, right? So if you ask people about college costs, they tell you it cost $100 when they went. I wouldn't know because it cost tens of thousands of dollars a semester when I went, and it costs twice that now, right? So I always talk about this as an issue of multi-generational leadership. We need people who are from different generations and have different experiences. It's not about eliminating anybody, it's not about forcing anybody out, but it's about harnessing kind of the vibrancy of our society and putting that into our government, and then making space for it to flourish. Remind me of your third question. I did 2 of the 3.
As the race gets more crowded, how will you distinguish yourself, and will you stay in if Harris comes in?
Yeah. So thank you for just asking, because everybody wants to know. First question first. Look, I am tough, and I have been through hard races. That is one thing that makes me stand out in this field. I have won in tough Republican areas. I have gone toe-to-toe in multiple Democratic primaries. I know what it's like to campaign. Some of these folks have just not had that journey into politics that I have had. This is going to be our next governor is going to have to deliver some, I think, hopefully very good news, but also some tough news. They're going to have to steer us through some really tough times with Trump, with climate change, with other things. So this is a time to have someone who's a fighter. This is a time to have someone who's okay, but some things are hard. Remember, I got my start in public service helping families who were facing foreclosure. Those were hard conversations. We could not help everybody. Not everyone's house could be saved, right? But it was worth doing. We saved some people and made the system better for everyone who came after. So I think that's one little thing. The other thing is I just have a lot more political experience. So I've had to stand on my own 2 feet, and you know, there's a room full of Republicans and they're big mad, and here we go. Let's get to an answer. Let's get to an answer. California's next governor is going to be a leader of the Democratic Party nationally. And so if we're looking for people who are younger, we're looking for people who have different life experiences, we're looking for people who can message on the economy, we're looking for people who are not kind of what everybody's used to, then we in California have to elect those people. It is, with all due respect to the folks in Louisiana and Idaho, they're not going to be producing the next batch of people with big voices, because the nature of winning there is hard. So our next leader needs to think about how are we going to help be a party that makes California from a policy perspective, but also messages politically in a way that California is an asset to the Democratic Party. Not just an ATM, not just donating, not just going every other year to Nevada to knock some doors, but actually showing what can be done. And I think there's a lot here in San Francisco to look at. Hard conversations, hard decisions, hard elections that you all have been through here in the city, but you're trying to grapple with what is the best way forward. You've been leaning in, trying to think about what do you want your city to look at. I think that's what we need. Anybody who tells you that they're gonna run no matter what is not really being honest with you about the realities. Any candidate is gonna have to always reevaluate when something happens in a race. And Kamala Harris is not just something, she's our vice president, our former vice president. So I will have to reassess, but I will tell you this. I am in this because I think I would be a better governor. I am not waiting, I am not thinking, I am leaning in, right? I know what it's like to lose a tough race. I lost one in the Senate. And I picked myself right back up, I went back to work in Congress, and I'm ready to go all in this race. And so I think that she'll make her decision when she makes it, and then I will have to figure out what that looks like. But the polling in this race right now, I have a 28-point lead with Democrats and independents, MPPs, the party preference voters, over the other candidates in this race. So I have a strong path to victory. I just need to keep going. I need to keep raising the resources. I need to keep winning the votes, and I'm going to use every single minute I can. I'm so glad I got in when I did, because this is a big state with a lot of people to meet, a lot of listening that you need to do, a lot of learning that you need to do, and I'm making use of every second of this race.
Woo, woo. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you. I'm a big fan of the way you stand up to people in Congress and say what's on your mind. My question is around the context that we're in today, which is, from my perspective, the President of the United States does not believe in following the law.
No,
and
he doesn't.
He's shown this over and over again, most recently with this whole thing around immigration. He hasn't lifted a finger to obey the Supreme Court of the United States of America. So I ask you, and I want to know what the thinking is in your mind Democratic Party, what are we going to do when the president continues to defy the Supreme Court and basically runs the show the way he feels like running the show with all of his bought and paid for henchmen? Well, what's next? Standing up and talking about it, I don't see as a viable option. What do you think?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things we are doing, and this is a hard problem to solve. I mean, this kind of behavior is what topples democracies, right? And this is exactly where we're at risk as a country, and I think a lot of us were really honest about just what this would look like if Trump won. We are litigating, and it is mattering. You're right that Trump has not obeyed some of the court's orders, but he has obeyed others. Sometimes after saying he wouldn't, then he changes his mind, and he does. We are winning in court, we are winning in district court, we are winning in appellate court, and we are winning quite a few in the Supreme Court. I fear that a day is coming in which there's a very big Supreme Court decision in which Donald Trump refuses to comply, and it puts us on a path to even deepens our constitutional crisis to a place where we're really at risk of breaking. The solution to that in part is to keep making clear to him what the consequences are going to be. And so the more that people can get expressed to him that they don't like what he's doing, the better. We also are only, and I know it feels like forever, but we are only a year and a half from winning back the House of Representatives. And I did this playbook. Well, I did this exact thing. Donald Trump was elected in 2016. I went there in 2018, and he didn't pass a single other bill for the next 2 years. So we have to get there, and we have to start planning now. So as much as it's easy to let the worry lead to paralysis, now is the time to start thinking about how we're going to win in 2026, how we're going to win the House of Representatives back. It is now. Now is the time to be recruiting candidates. Now is the time to be making sure you're active in your Democratic Party, recruiting more volunteers. It is now, because it is going to change what he does now if he sees that defeat potentially looming in 2026. So there is no easy, quick answer for this, but this is the best we can do in our democracy. And the last thing is protest. There is a value in that, right? There's a tipping point. People take to the street, it matters to him. And so I think it is worthwhile to keep engaging in those acts and continue to let him know where things stand. And the last thing I'm going to say is our governors are going to have, and our attorney generals are already doing this really, really effectively, coming together across states as attorney generals to strategize and to work. California needs to be a part with other governors of making sure that we're doing that. I am so fortunate to have 3 amazing colleagues from Congress, women that were elected with me in 2018 running for governor. If you don't know them, please support them. Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, up in November, Mikey Sherrill in a primary like Thursday in New Jersey, and Deb Holland, who's running in New Mexico. So we have, here's going to be potentially 4 of us who ran with Trump won, who are not going to waste 1 minute thinking about what used to be, but are know Trump's playbook because we've seen it before and we've stood up to it before, and thinking about how can California, it's tempting to just say we're different, we're California. But the truth is the rest of the country needs us to be with them and working together collaboratively to think about how can states strengthen and help these social programs, help people, help strengthen legal rights in this time of Donald Trump.
How will you protect our immigrant community?
Yes.
That are being literally picked off the streets right now without any due process?
Yeah. Thank you for asking about this. It's been a little surprising in this race, given that this is California, that a lot of candidates have had nothing to say about immigration. We've actually had 2 public events, 2 forums with the candidates. One was just the Democrats, one was the top Democrats, and a couple of the top Republicans, you can call them top, but top Republicans. Immigration wasn't a question at either of these events. That's telling you something, right? That's a problem. So due process is sacred to me. It's sacred to me as a lawyer. It is sacred to our democracy. We have to be crystal clear. So much of what Trump is doing with regard to immigration is illegal. It's also immoral, but it would be very clear that it is illegal. Immigration systems involve hard value choices about who gets to come and when and under what circumstances. There are hard questions to be asked and answered there. But what you are not allowed to do is simply break the law. And that is what he is doing. He is trampling on the Constitution. He is trampling on due process, he's giving essentially the middle finger to the Supreme Court and to our lower courts, and that is wrong, regardless of how well we design an immigration system. So I also think that there's a lesson here for Democrats now, which is we need to start writing on paper together what our immigration platform is going to look like when we are in power. We did not do this with abortion rights. We said the court protected it, that's great. We could have protected abortion through acting as Congress. We had 49 years we could have done that. And we didn't do it. And the Supreme Court came along in Dobbs, and we lost that as a national federal right. So yes, it's about standing up to Trump, but it's also what are we going to do? Because when we had the power for 4 years, we didn't deliver immigration reform. And we didn't even want to talk sometimes about immigration because it is a hard issue and it does involve hard value choices. And I think we should be honest about that. It is a challenge to figure out how many people to let in, how to make sure they flourish here, right? That is hard. Every country around the world is grappling with migration challenges in different ways. We're not alone in that. What we are alone in is the fact that we're not doing the political work to come up with something that is orderly and that is fair. I think it is really wrong and really discouraging for Donald Trump to say to people who did every single thing this country asked. They waited, they came into a program, they are lawfully present here, they have done nothing wrong, to have that jerked away from them. I think that is incredibly damaging to what it means to be an American and to what this country has always stood for. So we have to think about that. Do we want that right to sit with the president? Or should that right sit with Congress? Let's make laws that change that. Congress can decide that is a power that rests with it and not with the president. But I think we have to build that forward-looking immigration, and I think we have to continue to talk about it and not be cowed. A lot of people say that's a hard one, so I'll just not talk about that. That is not the answer. That is not the answer. These are people in our communities, these are our coworkers, these are people who take care of us, these are people who are paying taxes, they are part of the fabric of our society, and we owe it to them to fight for them too. And we owe it to everybody around the world and to people who are already here to have an orderly, fair, clear system going forward. Okay, I gotta go over here. And then I'll go, Kat, and then I'll come back around this way, don't worry.
So I apologize, I was late because I typically expect politicians to arrive late, so.
I was early. I was ready to leave, I was early.
I seriously want to give you props for that. So that said, I don't know if you've discussed this, but, we export oligarchs. Like they're born here, or they're not born here, they just come here. And they try to run California, and then they try to run the country. So I'm wondering what you're going to do about that.
Yeah, it has been a fun day on social media. If you have not taken the time, I generally encourage everyone to stay off social media, especially raw in politics, but today is really a fun time. I mean, it's like, it's really quite fun. No, look, I mean, I think there's a lesson here for us about Democrats making sure that we have stood up to corruption, that we have done things to think about how to put guardrails in place so when the party switches over, other people don't come along and do this. Let me tell you a story about this. My last term in Congress, I sort of befriended a Republican, and we didn't agree on a lot of stuff, but he was interested in trying to make sure that there wasn't corruption in government. And we defined that a little differently, but we knew his name was Jamie Comer. You might have heard of him. He was the chair of the House Oversight Committee. He was the person who endlessly tried to impeach Hunter Biden, who wasn't even in office. I mean, this was his thing. But we wrote a bill together. I mean, literally, this is what you think Congress might be when you envision how good could it be. We sat there together with our staff and talked about what kinds of ethics we wanted our presidents to have and our vice presidents. And we wrote a bill, the Presidential Ethics Accountability Act, that would have required presidents, vice presidents, their spouses, and their adult children to make disclosures around gifts, around government contracts, around money. We worked together, we were gonna make this bipartisan, so what, we entered the bill together, one Republican, one Democrat, even numbers, this was our whole plan. We couldn't get any Democrats or any Republicans to join us. And all the Democrats said is, this is just about helping them beat up Hunter. And all the Republicans said, this is just about helping them beat up Trump's kids. And for that, it never moved forward. And now look where we are, right? We would have been much better off passing this bill. You know why? Because it was a good idea. It was good governance. I don't care who's in the White House, this bill addressed a real problem. We are electing people who are older and their adult children have business dealings and are taking on roles in the administration. And we should have transparency into what those business dealings are. That's just good governance. This was a great bill. Not one person said to either one of us, this bill's a bad idea. Not one person. About 2 weeks ago, the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee said that we should introduce this bill and pass it. But he wouldn't sign on to my bill because he didn't want to help Republicans, right? Because it was a bipartisan bill. This is part of the answer. So until we start just enacting things that are good policy, we can't do it just because of Elon. We have to get ahead of this stuff and think about what kind of rules do we want to have for good government? What should that look like? We do not have to wait for everything to be a disaster to make it better. That is not how anyone should run their lives. That is not how you should run your business. That is not how you should run your nonprofit. It is not how we should run the federal government. So we've known we have this issue with adult children. We learned in Trump's first presidency about it. So we should have gone addressing it right away. And it really was, for me, it was like the kind of last frustrating thing of Congress when I realized not only can I get any sponsors, we can't get any sponsors. And when I went to Congress, one of the first things I was told was, oh, if things are bipartisan, you'll get votes. And then by the time I left Congress, if things were bipartisan, nobody would support it. That's really messed up. Really, really messed up. Kat?
As governor, how would you address the opioid and fentanyl crises?
Yeah, so it's very, very clear that we are gonna have to continue to invest in evidence-based treatment. There are making scientific progress in terms of how you can treat people, not just to revive them through making sure that we have naloxone available, but also getting people treatment so that the treatment regimes that are available are different than they used to be. They do not require kind of daily treatment. They're easier to administer. Cracking down on fentanyl coming here, of course, is important. We have a lot of drug smuggling, and a lot of it is done by American citizens. That is one of the biggest urban myths. Is most of the drug smuggling over the southern border, for example, is done by Americans. And so that's obviously part of it, but I think it's also more fundamentally about making sure that we're treating addiction and that we're getting ahead of some of the mental health issues and some of the physical health issues that lead people to try opioids and they're very quickly addictive when they do. So I do think we're making some good progress in California and in San Francisco on this in particular. I've talked a lot about this with Matt Haney, for example. This is another issue where I think Democrats thought if they just didn't do anything, their problem would go away. I think we've moved past that now, and we are seeing Democrats say, I'm a progressive Democrat and I care about making sure that people don't end up with substance use disorders. That is a really difficult, unpleasant, sad, and happy life, and I'm gonna talk about that issue and I'm gonna do something about it. And you can be thoughtful about criminal justice, you can be thoughtful about how to make sure people have opportunities to do better and to have a second chance and still tackle these problems, including substance use. So I think we're actually making good progress on this, but it has been a very high price to pay. I promised someone I would go over there. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Just one of you. Yeah. Did you both have your hands up? Okay. I'll take them both and I'll do them quickly. There we go.
Two questions.
Yeah.
One,
Oh, no!
You mentioned that a box arrived. You mentioned that a box arrived at your house from Amazon. Are you okay with the fact that Amazon is owned by a major Trump enabler? How do you deal with that?
Yeah. So I don't love that there are any major Trump enablers, and I do make it a point to try to shop locally because I'll tell you why. It's not so much about punishing people for their political views. It's how much I value being able to walk into a store and talk to someone. to be able to get help, to have those conversations, to have a neighborhood that looks like that. So, in fairness to me, my son.
My question is, are you okay with the fact that your son did it?
I don't order books from Amazon. I'm a huge library girl, and our library has a used bookstore that I also patronize a lot. But I know it's an interesting conversation to have with my son about that.
Next quick question, which isn't so quick. Republicans have really hijacked language. How do we overcome that? How do we scale that up?
Yeah, so part of it is Democrats have gotten afraid. So like radical honesty is part of this. So sometimes I think I wanna say to some of these Democrats, who do you think you're fooling? Everybody just noticed you didn't answer the question. Or who do you think you're fooling? Everything is not great, right? So I think part of this is be very plain spoken, be a little bit brave. Don't be afraid to tell people we tried this policy and it didn't do what we wanted it to do, or it didn't do enough. And there's more work to be done. And I think that sometimes the threat of Trump, the costs and consequences, the fear of Trump and all of those policy decisions, I think has made Democrats less brave in many ways. And that's not even talking about kind of where you land on the left or center or where you fit on any particular policy. It's just a willingness to stand on your own 2 feet and use plain language. Some of the reason that my colleagues would say, well, you're such a good communicator, how do you do it? I want to be understood. Some of them don't. And when you want to be understood, when you are understood, people will sometimes disagree with you. And that happens to me a lot. I would so much rather have that than have someone leave feeling like, I don't know what she believes, and I don't know what's going on, and I don't know whether this is working, I don't have my answer. I would much rather have I think you're wrong on that. I'm gonna hear that. That is important for me to hear. And so I think part of the battle with language is Democrats are afraid to be brave and clear in their language. And the other thing is about question about making space. We have some good messengers. Are we making space for them to be our leading messengers? And I think there's questions to ask and answer about that, right? Because we have talent in our party, make no mistake. But are we giving them the microphone? Are we giving them the platform to be able to be heard? And I think there's work to be done on that front.
So we have one final question, I think we're gonna do right over
Yeah.
here, and then I'd like to take a group photo. Everyone can stay seated, but I'll go on stage again.
Sorry, I can't relate, so apologies if you already answered this. My question is, if you make the median household income in California, it's almost impossible to buy a house in almost any county. I have a friend who left the Bay Area to move up to El Norte or Chico, and bought the cheapest house in town, making the median family income. And the question is always like, how do you balance vested property owners who don't want to see people who like property prices going up with people who want to buy houses? And I guess I'm just like, what is your perspective on making California affordable for the average working family?
Yeah. This is my top priority. I am laser focused on bringing costs down. It is a huge problem for workers, for families, for retirees who are on fixed income. It's also a huge problem for our business community, who are raising wages in many instances, but the increase isn't enough a year later, right? So we're just in this virtuous cycle, right? Where we're paying people more and then it's not enough, and we're paying people more and then it's not enough. So we have to address the cost side. And I think for too long, too many in government have acted like, well, what are you gonna do? Stuff costs money. The answer is stuff costs money for a lot of reasons. Some of them are hard to fix. The scarcity of land in some parts of California is a tough problem. I can't manufacture more land, right, as your governor. But there are things that we can do. Let me give you one easy example. Changing the rules that we have around permitting certain kinds of housing. The rule is called CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. Changing those rules to permit infill housing without so much cost and delay to take up to 20% off the cost of market rate new housing. That will really help. It's also great for the environment because that new housing is almost zero emission compared to what we currently have. So it's not that just building more housing answers all the questions about who gets it and then what do we do about people who don't earn enough. That problem remains. But that is really low-hanging fruit, and there's a bill in the Senate and a bill in the Assembly, both of which would address CEQA reform. One is sponsored by Scott Wiener, one is sponsored by Buffy Wicks, one is Scott San Francisco, Buffy's Oakland. Both these bills would be the first real effort to look at whether these laws are being abused to just stop us from building things we desperately need, rather than being used as they legitimately should be to make sure we're making environmentally smart decisions, thinking about the environmental consequences of building. This is why Texas has more green energy infrastructure than we do. It's not that they have more sun or wind or smart people. Okay, we invented all of that here, all of it, the battery storage, the clean hydrogen, the renewable biofuel, geothermal, all of that is happening at our research universities and our labs, but it's getting built in Utah, it's getting built in Texas, it's getting built in Canada, because it's too hard to permit even green energy projects here, right? And so that's holding us back from getting to our climate goals. So housing, we have to build more. We also have questions about what are we gonna do about people who can't afford even market rate housing, but you're absolutely right. The typical person who is a chemist or a teacher with a master's degree, someone who's a trained nurse who's working 40 hours a week as an ICU nurse, they cannot afford housing. And that has to change. We have more jobs compared to the number of housing units than any other state in the country. We are job rich and housing poor, and that has to change, because we are not gonna grow our economy if we don't continue to attract people to California, including young people. If we're losing people from our universities, we're moving out of state because they don't think they can afford housing here, either rental or ownership. And so we are short on student housing, we are short on senior housing, we are short on housing for people with disabilities, we are short on housing in our rural areas. Median house in Bakersfield, now I like Bakersfield, but I'm guessing in San Francisco's a lot of you. Might choose a different place to live. I like Bakersfield, but the median house there is $400,000, more than that, $500,000. There are not these little, it's not as simple as just move farther away. That is not where we are. We don't have enough housing anywhere in our state. And so we have to tackle that, and it's gonna mean making it a priority. I think Governor Newsom did the right thing in making housing a priority in 2018. When he ran the first time, I think he has tried to hold cities to their affordable housing goals, and he has been willing to sue cities when they have not been willing to do the right thing on housing. But we need to unleash the market forces and just make the sticker price of building housing cheaper in California. Once we have some more housing, then we can begin to think about how do we make sure it's getting to all of the people who need it at a price point that can do it. We don't have anything to even distribute now, even if we want. Can't even get to the distributional problem because we don't have anything to give out. Okay, Celeste's gonna make me stop. I'm gonna be here for just a few minutes. So we're gonna do this group picture, and then I will come back up here. And I'm gonna come here, then I'm gonna come back up here, and if people wanna get in line, I am happy to continue to take your questions or do pictures or do anything else. My website is katieporter.com. I'm still on social media at katieporteroc. I also have a Substack that I really enjoy that's called Beyond the Whiteboard, because you just can't fit it all on a whiteboard sometimes. So an example of some recent Substacks I did was one on how Trump's tariffs would make housing more expensive. And so I encourage you to sign up for Beyond the Whiteboard. It's a really good way to kind of follow along the policy proposals that I'm working on as I run for governor. Thank you everyone for being here. We're 1 year away from
the sun's shining there, but I'm gonna try. And then I just want to remind everyone there is an event in this room, so when you do exit, please exit out.
But it's not as good as ours.
No, that's fast. Okay. You going? All right. Sorry, everyone over here.
Yeah, come on, we gotta get some.
All right, so go. I can run over. You're right. Come on this way. All right.
All right. Okay. Good to see you
Hey,
again.
gorgeous. Good to see you.
All right, here we go.